Now, street art has had an interesting history in this country, from the political murals during the Troubles in Belfast to the debate surrounding a certain Repeal the Eighth piece in Dublin a couple of years ago. Harry Moylan is a Dublin based communications professional who recently released a documentary about the street art communities in Belfast and Dublin, and he's on the line to have a chat about why this form of art resonates so much with many of us. So, Harry, Full Colour is your first ever independently produced documentary. So, why, out of all the topics you could have chosen, why did you choose to focus on street art?
I chose this because I just bought a camera about 18 months ago, and I was looking for a topic because I kind of like for in my various productions that I've worked in before, I was always kind of like editorially limited by maybe when I was working for the European Union, so I was limited by the fact that I kind of always kind of had to stick to kind of the policies and everything that we had to discuss there. And then when I worked in other student projects, I worked with different directors and script writers. So when I finally bought my own camera, I decided, okay, I'm going to make a documentary. And the only thing that I really knew at the time, because I was living and working in Brussels, is I kind of wanted to try and capture to some extent something relevant to the times that we lived in. And at the time, Brexit was everywhere. So Brexit was very much kind of up for debate in the Irish border. So that kind of like from there, I kind of started to think about how I wanted whatever topic I picked for the documentary, I wanted it to be relevant to all of Ireland, like both the north and in the south as well. So that was the starting point. And then I was just kind of thinking about it, and I was talking about it with some colleagues and stuff. And somebody brought up the old political murals in the north, which is obviously visually interesting for a documentary. But then also kind of like from there, I kind of started to look into that topic, and I started to look into the history of the murals, and that was all very interesting. But it felt a little bit from like a lot of the YouTube videos and documentaries that I watched that like the topic had been covered and it was very interesting, but I was looking for maybe a slightly new approach. And then I came across this BBC article that was kind of like looking at the new artists who've taken over the cathedral quarter in the center of Belfast, and are kind of like putting up new art which is unrelated to the old sectarian stuff. And then it kind of like developed from there, and it turned into street art. And then I brought in Dublin because Dublin's my hometown, and I kind of wanted to get a contrast once again relevant to the entire island. That was kind of it. That was the starting point. I kind of like, so I didn't have any kind of a background in kind of like a passion for street art. Not that I didn't always appreciate it, but it kind of organically just arrived at that point, and then I just kind of went from there.
Okay, so Brexit was happening at the time that you were thinking about doing this documentary, and you wanted something relevant, and you were talking about the political murals up in Belfast to do with the Troubles. So, is that the reason that you chose murals as opposed to stenciling, stickers, or installations, or whatever other street art you could have focused on? Did the political aspect have some sort of influence on you?
So originally I kind of came into it a little bit kind of more like I kind of in my interviews with the street artists, I was talking about kind of street art in general. So I was talking about the wider topics of it. But then actually when I was talking to Mazer in Dublin, that he kind of like did a quick breakdown where like I think I asked him like possibly like a basic enough question, and he was like, "What kind of street art are you talking about here? Are you talking about the graffiti bombing scene, which is exploding in Dublin at the moment? Are you talking about the mural scene? And I kind of like just sat back and I went, "Oh, okay, I probably need to do a little bit more research, and I need to see exactly what I am talking about."
Yeah.
And I did settle on the mural scene because that's what I was naturally being pulled towards, like once again stemming from like looking at the old political murals. And it did seem that like that's where a lot of the story was, certainly online from my research in both Belfast, like all of the new art that's kind of being created as a reaction to like trying to move away from the old political murals was mural art rather than other forms of street art. And then in Dublin as well, the topics that the documentary touches on to do with kind of removal was also focused on like subsets murals. I wasn't going out of my way to make it political, which is like I think a lot of people kind of certainly the reaction has been like, oh, you really went for the political angle, and to a certain extent that's true. In that, like, I mean, I guess I had studied politics in college, and then I was working for the EU. So I guess maybe without even consciously realizing it, I might be moving towards political issues. But genuinely, I went into a lot of those interviews just trying to talk about art. But an interesting thing that I kind of realized the pattern was that it always came back to politics rather than me driving it back, like kind of like with Mazer's repeal mural, it was kind of like being taken down by Dublin City Council. I went and spoke to Dublin City Council then, and then the same in the north, where you kind of like it was a reaction to the old political mural. So I felt like it's someone said something to me during it. They said writing on a wall is always political. One of the artists said that, and I feel like I agreed with them by the time I finished.
Yeah, I think that with street art and particularly murals, it's funny that you say like that you didn't want to focus on the political aspect of it, but then even when the documentary comes out, the feedback is, "Oh, you focused on the political aspect of it." So the documentary does cover a lot, like the Troubles, the murder of Laura McKee, the repeal of the Eighth Referendum. So why do you think this type of art is so powerful and resonates with people from a political point of view?
I think it's just because it's just so evocative of the moment. Like it's kind of like it's street art is first of all publicly available to everyone, so it's like the most democratically available art that like you can see, everyone can see it in the street. You don't have to go into a gallery, so it's open to everyone. What I've found now from kind of like spending 18 months immersed in the topic is it generally tends to reflect like the zeitgeist of our times, like George Floyd, who was killed in America. I'm like my newsfeed is currently filled with these kind of graffiti mural tributes to him, and those are very much like all the major news organizations are leading with images from like kind of graffiti tributes, and then even like coronavirus murals at the moment. Like if you look in Belfast, like it's actually funny. All the Catholic and Protestant communities are now like painting murals dedicated to kind of healthcare workers and stuff. So whatever it is about it, it seems to it's available to everyone, and it's always changing. It's a medium which is always updating. It's always like things are getting removed and new things are going up. So it's just kind of like a public, it's a public arena for that art, and that's why I think people respond to it that way.
And on the topic of pieces getting removed, one aspect of street art which has always fascinated me is the legality of it. So you have the likes of Keith Haring, who got arrested in New York when he was drawing on blank poster spots in the subway. And I know a lot of the artists that you interviewed mentioned that they would try to get permission, but are there still instances where they wouldn't have got approval? And do they still get arrested or fines?
I think that like it depends where you are, first of all. But I think that there's still like it's more that people get issued with like takedown orders and stuff. But certainly from like the speaking to the artists and stuff, like it still like evokes a strong response from people on the street. Like there's a reason why it still happens in back streets and stuff. It's because people don't like people like if we go out today and with a couple of markers and start like kind of like putting like writing our name around the city, people will stop and they might be like, what the hell are you doing? Or they'll be like, I'm going to call the guards or something like that. So it is still something that that is like frowned upon, and if you don't have permission, it is like it is illegal. But certainly in the case of Subset, it's more to do with just being asked to take it down rather than kind of maybe getting fines. But I suppose with the takedown orders, they are also like threatened that they will be fined if they don't. So yeah.
And you mentioned their Subset, so they are a Dublin street art collective and they stay anonymous. And something that I've always related to with street art is the anonymity of it. Like someone like Banksy has managed to keep anonymous for his whole career, even though his name is recognised all over the world. Like my mum even knows the name Banksy. But in this documentary, Subset are the only ones to stay anonymous. So why do you think this is the case?
From my research with them, they're a collective, and I think that they don't want to identify as any one person. It's more like kind of a group movement, and it's definitely like with Banksy. Yeah, I mean, it's like they don't, people want to kind of hide their identity a little bit in that sense. But you probably have to. I don't feel confident enough in that I know for certain why they choose to do that, but that's their public MO. It's no one person, it's a collective.
And do you think legality has anything to do with it? Because someone like Banksy is doing illegal mural painting and stenciling, whereas a lot of the artists featured in your documentary seem to be actually asking permission to carry out their art.
I mean, that's it. I mean, it's you if you get permission, if you go through like the planning permission procedures that Dublin City Council lay out, then I think you're fine. But I also think that that's kind of maybe at odds with the spirit of like graffiti and street art, which is that it originally like came from a place of kind of like screw the system a little bit. So the idea of like going through planning permission procedures is possibly a little bit at odds with the original point of it.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the future, I think it was Adam, the tour guide for the street art in Belfast, who said that the cities are changing, but what are they changing for? And there was a rep from the city council trying to be quite diplomatic about the whole thing. So what do you think the future of street art looks like in the cities of Ireland?
I think that in Dublin, I feel like I think it was Kinmex actually said that like she's seen this process happening before. The Mexican street artist, she said that I've seen this happening before in other countries, and I think we're going to come to a better agreement where basically like Dublin City Council have expressed an openness and they do support the street art, and Subset are also driving for change in that sense as well. So I think we'll probably get to a place in Dublin where we will like have more color on walls. If you take like the kind of contemporary mural scene in Dublin kind of like maybe became more visually prominent from like around 2011, and it's going in a direction where more and more walls are going to be covered. So I think that it will just continue progressing. There's always going to be a bit of friction there, but I think that Dublin is kind of like changing a little bit. As far as Belfast, I mean, they're different. Certainly in terms of like commercial enterprise, I can't speak to that too much, but it seems like it's similar to Dublin in that like there is increasing amount of kind of like property developers kind of like changing the city, bringing hotels in and everything, and it does shrink the space for the arts.
Yeah.
But as far as like mural art and stuff, I think that that's like well and truly fused into Northern Ireland's kind of like DNA. So I think that as far as expressing themselves through street art, they're probably more creatively free than we are, and it's a matter of like Dublin catching up with Belfast. But yeah, so I think I'd be optimistic about it, but I think that change will take time in Dublin.
Yeah. And what else are you working on at the moment? Have you any projects on the go during lockdown?
Not really. This was kind of the big one for the last like 18 months. This was a really great project, but it's also kind of expensive to do. So you kind of like need to look after myself before I kind of jump into something again. But I mean, if there's any production companies listening and they want to bring me in, I'm right here. I have loads of ideas, and I'm very happy to make documentaries for the rest of my life.
Fantastic. So Harry Moylan, creator of a new documentary about the street art cultures in Belfast and Dublin called Full Colour. It's out now on YouTube, and Harry's available for work as well. Harry, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks very much, man.